Hi. So in this session, we'll discuss data validation. Now, the first question which may have come in your mind is what is data validation or why do we use data validation in an Excel file? Now, when you create an Excel file, it's not always necessarily that you will be the only one who will be using that Excel file or you will be the only one who will be entering data in that Excel file. There can be other users also who will be entering or using that particular Excel file. And when we talk about multiple users entering data in an Excel file, it's not always in the most consistent way that they would enter data. So for example, over here, I've got 9 people who entered their name, their age, their gender, their marital status. Now, look at the gender column. I've got options for male. I've got someone has mentioned as male, someone has mentioned as M. For female, I've got female, I've got F. If I look at the marital status column, I've got single, someone wrote unmarried, someone wrote married, then someone made a spelling mistake while writing married. So I've got these different options over here. And over here, I've got a table on which I had applied data validation. And if you look at the column entries for gender, and if you look at column entries for marital status, they are much more consistent. For gender, I just have either an M or an F. For marital status, I've got either a single or married. Similarly, if you look at the age column over here, now age is usually a number, but someone wrote 22.5 suggesting that that person is 22 years and 6 months, but I just need a number. So over here on applying data validation, if the person would have entered 22.5, Excel would have given an error that the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. So in simple terms, what data validation does is it restricts the values which can be entered in a cell. So for example, over here in the gender column, I can either have an M or an F. If I try to write male, again Excel will give me an error. In the marital status column, I can only have either a single or a married option. If someone wants to write, then also Excel will give an error. So now what we'll do, we'll look at the different options in data validation and how you can apply them. So let's go to the first tab. Go to the data toolbar. I've got the data validation command over here. So I'll just select a bunch of cells over here and then we'll just apply data validation or this restriction to these cells, and then we'll see how we can enter values or how or what impact it will have on those values. When I select data validation, by default, this would be any value because as of now, there is no restriction which has been applied to these cells. When I click on this drop down, these are the different type of restrictions which can be applied. So a whole number restriction, that is, we'll just be able to enter only whole numbers, no decimal points. Decimals, they'll allow you to enter decimals along with whole numbers as well. List is something similar to what we saw in the previous example, male or female, married, unmarried. Date, if you want the users to enter the date between two dates or after a particular date. Time, again similar to date, just that now we are dealing with time over here. Text length, this is with respect to the number of characters which I'm entering in a cell. So for example, if I'm entering A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, so this is 8 characters or this is 8 text length. Custom is if you want to enter a custom function. So we'll study whole number, decimal list, date, time, and text length over here. And then I'll also walk you through what is input message and error alert as well. So now let's first apply the whole number restriction to these bunch of cells. When I click on whole number, I get an option in data over here. So I can select whatever I want to, between, not between, equal to. So let's just go with between. And let's say I want only numbers between 18 and 24. When I click on OK, so the restriction has been applied. Let's just color these cells so that we know which cells we have applied data validation to. Now when I click on 18, 18 is fine. When I click on 17, Excel gives me an error that the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions. So I'll retry. Let's put 19, 21, 24 is fine. Let's try and put a decimal point. Again, Excel gives me an error. So let's enter 20. Now let's look at the second type of restriction. Let's color these cells again. Data, data validation. Right now, any value can be entered in these cells. Let's put decimal. Again, let's just choose between 18 and 24 over here. So I can enter 18. I can enter 18.1, whereas in the preceding example you saw when we were just dealing with whole numbers that it does not allow you to put decimal points. 23.9, 23.99, but if I just slightly go over 24.1, it will give me an error. 24, it's fine. The third data validation type is list. So let's just create a list. Let's cancel it. Let's first highlight the cells on which I want to apply this type of data validation. And let's say I want grades over here, B, C, D, E. Data validation. I want a list, and the source of this list should be these particular cells. And now just click on OK. So for each and every cell, you will have this drop down, which will have these 5 options. And what if you want to write something else? Then Excel will give you an error. Let's look at dates now. So let me just highlight these cells. Go to data, data validation, date. Let's say I want to enter dates in 2017 itself. So this is fine. But what if I enter any particular date in 2016? So Excel gives me an error again. Let's look at the time one. Again, I'll just color these cells. And it's not important for you to highlight or color these cells on which data validation is applied. I'm just doing it for helping you have a better understanding on which cells we've applied data validation to. So data validation, time, let's look at midnight and 1 a.m. When I click on OK, so this is fine. This is also fine. But what if I do? So Excel gives me an error again. The last one is the text length. Data validation, text length. Let's assume that we want the number of characters to be less than 10. So let's enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Excel gives an error. Similarly, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. This is fine. Similarly, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. This will give an error. Now let's look at some of the other options, input message and error alert over here. So let's just select all these cells first. Data validation, input message. Data validation applied. Please enter only whole numbers, no decimal points. So what the input message does is it acts as an insert command option over here. So whenever I will be on cells where data validation has been applied and this input message has been applied, whenever my cursor is on those cells, it will give me this particular message. It will display this message. So it makes it easier for the end user also to understand, okay, what sort of data can be filled in these particular cells. Now let's look at, again, I'll select these cells and let's look at error alert. So I've got stop warning information. And just to show you how this works, let's say I enter 25 over here. So you can see right now I'm getting a cross sign. I've got Microsoft Excel over here and I've got a default message. Data validation. Okay, let me again select all these cells. Data validation, error alert. So I can select warning or information, warning, but I'll go with stop. I can write anything what I want. So when I enter say 25, it gives me a message wrong. Please enter only whole numbers. So these are some of the options for data validation, and this is how data validation becomes really useful when there are multiple users who are entering data in an Excel file. Now, following this video, we have another video which would be discussing about data protection. And following that, we'll have some exercises also. If you've got any questions or any queries, just drop me an email. Thanks.